Hello, resident Popeyes fan here, and whenever eating my annual Popeyes meal, I always think of the most disturbing things I've done. I mean, I've tried raising up the trash can, licking my own elbows. I mean, hell, I even took a shit after Chipotle while watching Overflow. I'm a menace!
In order to cope with these horrific actions, I decided to watch something more comedic. I scrolled through Netflix and saw cuties, so I logged off the app. I went to Amazon, envisioned Jeff Bezos getting pegged, and I logged off. So I finally went to HBO Max, and saw a little show called Barry.
So today, I'm going to be watching the HBO comedy show, Barry. Hopefully I don't get depressed.
Now before I go full nuts to butts, I gotta mention that I have yet to review anything other than a video game. Kind of. I did make that one room video that you may have saw, that was for a school project. So hopefully this video lets me expand my artistic palette and analysis for more things, I guess. So with that quick PSA, let's see who the fuck Barry is.
Grab your toolbox. I want to cut off his eyelids.
His eyelids?
This is Bill Hader, creator and star in Barry. After leaving SNL, Bill Hader came up with the series to explore his PTSD he had on being SNL, and wanted to explore darker forms of comedy as SNL was, a little restrictive. Alongside Bill Hader was Alec Berg, who helped co-create the series. In January 2016, HBO ordered a pilot episode and gave the series a full green light in June of that same year. Season 1 consisted of 8 episodes and would air across March to May of 2018. Anyways, with that little quick brief backstory, let's start with the first episode of Season 1, Make Your Mark.
On that TV over there, since you've been in the room, is a woman with her titties hanging out. Now, I know I'm pretty, but I ain't as pretty as a couple of titties.
The episode opens with a dead man as the camera pans to Barry, who finishes his hit job. From there, we learn Barry's full name is Barry Berkman and has been hired by a Chechen mobster named Goran to kill Ryan Madison, who has been, plowing his wife. Now, I must mention that this conversation perfectly sets up the plot and comedic tone of Barry. Barry makes a joke about stabbing a guy in the balls, but says it in the most serious way possible. Barry blends deadpan comedy and cringe comedy, as well as more standard forms of comedy. It can provide visual comedy and, of course, more standard spoken comedy that you find in most average comedy movies. Barry will always provide laughs, and plenty of them, but when it needs to be serious, it can, and the way it balances its tone is one of the best parts of the show. You can go from NoHo Hank sending a gulp emoji to Barry, to more dark comedy, with Barry receiving a phone call from Sally while Fuchs is getting manhandled by some Chechens, to just flat out pure darkness, but let's not spoil it yet. Anyways, before I continue on with the plot, I feel like I should introduce the main cast so you aren't confused whenever I mention their names. Let's start off with our protagonist, NoHo Hanks! Nah, I'm just kidding. Of course, the main character here is Barry, or Barry Berkman, or Barry Block. Not much is known about the childhood of Barry, but we do know that Fuchs Monroe was a family friend and was probably emotionally connected to Barry at a very young age. Barry would serve in the army and would make friends with plenty of the soldiers, mainly Chris and Albert, and remember them both. I promise, Chris and Albert, they'll serve a purpose in the plot. Now, while serving a post, Barry would claim his first ever kill by shooting a couple of, sheep fuckers, as they call them. Well, this sounds like a brutal and possibly disturbing thing. In reality, all of Barry's friends celebrate Barry's first kill and in general have an overall positive mood. It's like they just graduated high school or something. But while serving, Albert gets shot, and Barry quickly tries to save him before going on one of his, what I like to call, Barry rage moments, where he basically tries to kill anything or anyone he wants dead, and in this case, it's the person who shot Albert, which I guess is pretty understandable. I mean, you're in war. However, instead, he shoots a random civilian, killing him and getting discharged after Albert convinced him to do it, so, he doesn't get charged with any, war crimes or some shit. And when Barry gets discharged, Fuchs is there to welcome him. Barry would then become a hitman, where he grew tired and depressed because of this job, while also suffering from PTSD from his time in the war. Overall, Barry is an emotionally broken man who struggles with socializing and taking accountability for any number of his crimes. Barry, like Gene Cousineau says, is a complex soul who, while being a hitman, thus a killer, presents some relatability at the end of the day. You want to see him get over his mental issues and, improve in society. It also might help that, number one, he doesn't like being a hitman and hates killing people in general, or maybe it's just the fact that he's played by Flint Lockwood. Anyways, the next major character is Fuchs Monroe, played by Stephen Root, who is Barry's mentor/father figure, I guess. Fuchs, as I mentioned earlier, was a family friend and came to Barry after he was discharged. From there, Fuchs turned Barry's violent tendencies into a lucrative career known as bounty hunting, and told Barry that he only kills bad people, which is a complete lie. Fuchs is extremely manipulative, turning Barry into a killer. Kinda. I mean, Barry already had some rage in him and tendencies to just kill, but Fuchs only exacerbated it. One of the main story questions is if Barry is naturally violent, and Fuchs is kind of the man on Barry's shoulder telling him to murder. Fuchs is also a smooth talker, preferring to talk his way out of problems than through brute force, but he's also kind of pathetic, with almost no physical prowess. Most of the time he just yells at Barry to do all the violent/physical things while he just sits on the couch eating ice cream or some shit. Next up is Sally Reed, played by Sarah Goldberg, an aspiring actress attending Gene Cousineau's acting class along with Barry and Ryan Madison. Sally is a talented and determined actress who tries to do anything to make it into Hollywood. She and Barry eventually form an on and off romantic relationship that constantly shifts from charming and sweet to, not that. Sally is very complex, and the show explores her past of neglectful parents and abusive partners. But I'll go into more detail about that when we get to the plot point of it. Sally, while caring about the people she loves, is ultimately selfish, constantly wanting and prioritizing her career over most people, including the one she loves the most, like Barry. And speaking of selfish people, now we must talk about Gene Cousineau, played by Henry Winkler, the actor and acting teacher of Sally and Barry. Gene is a mentor/father figure to Barry, I guess. I feel like I said this before. Gene is an extremely self-absorbed and overall asshole to most people, and because of him suiciding his acting career, he has to resort to being an acting teacher. However, after meeting Barry, he ends up being an accidental father figure to him, giving advice to Barry and helping him pursue his acting dream. I feel like Gene's character has a lot changing throughout the general plot, and I feel like I should talk about his main character arc when we go over the main plot. Last, but certainly not least, we have the GOAT, NoHo Hank.
I have seen way too much Rule 34 of NoHo Hank, man. I mean, it's insane.
NoHo Hank is a charismatic and naive member of the Chechen crime family who ends up in contact with Barry during the Ryan Madison hit. While being a part of the Chechen crime family, NoHo Hank isn't really built for it and is more focused on being stylish than being a gangster. NoHo Hank is by far the most comedic character in the whole series and is absolutely hilarious with almost every word spoken. It's like every time he's on screen, I just have to bust out a quickie. But of course, NoHo Hank changes throughout the show, so yeah, let's just get started with Season 1 of Barry. Let's go! So like I mentioned, Barry picks up a hit for Ryan Madison, and of course, tries to learn more about him and learns that he's attending Cousineau's acting class while following him. Barry ends up watching Gene insult Sally to get a better performance, and Barry ends up being moved by her performance right when Ryan Madison walks in, and they end up doing a scene together where Barry delivers a performance about as good as Rent-A-Girlfriend. Anyways, Sally invites Barry to a dinner, and being the socially awkward killer, of course, he accepted. The dinner would be the exact scene that Barry falls in love with her, right before Ryan Madison dives in and shits on Barry's name.
You know, I was against killing Ryan, but lately, I've been thinking it's okay to kill him now.
Ryan tells Barry should get a stage name, and that's when Barry Blanc is born. You know, Breaking Bad and Heisenberg? Yeah, this is that, but really fucking funny. Barry drives Ryan home, who is completely washed, and they have a little bro hug. But NoHo Hank was watching this whole time and alarms Fuchs that he may be getting a little too close to the target. This is where we get the first of many Fuchs manipulation scenes, and get ready to see a whole lot more. Fuchs shits on Barry's dream to be an actor, and while yes, Fuchs is being a manipulative asshole here, he is kinda right. Like, Barry is a killer, and being a famous actor doesn't really mesh with that. So Barry ends up confessing to Gene about his hitman lifestyle, and that he is extremely depressed about his life and hopes acting can help him. Gene, however, just thinks this is a monologue for his acting class, and accepts him, as long as he pays.
We were this close!
Barry then goes to kill Ryan, where he finds him dead in a car already. He then sees NoHo Hank, and the Chechen henchmen who are clearly about to kill him. Barry proceeds to game end all of them besides NoHo Hank because he's the absolute goat, and walks into a dinner where he tells the server that he is indeed an actor. The first episode is pretty good at setting up the plot and most of the characters' personality and conflicts, so that's pretty good. But this first episode also perfectly sets up the tone for most of season 1. It's very comedic with a sprinkle of action and drama. And I didn't mention this, but the acting class is absolutely hilarious, with most of them being LA stereotypes. Almost none of them have any acting talent, but their dialogue and charm is just so funny. The acting class is really the thing that separates Barry's tone, in my opinion. When the acting class is in a scene, you know it's going to be a lot of comedy, and when they leave after season 2, you can see a drastic tone shift in the later seasons. Anyways, back into the plot shit, Gene informs the class about Ryan Madison's murder, and Barry's reaction is just so fucking funny, man.
Ryan Madison is dead.
Anyways, the class decides to use his death to motivate them, and they decide to act out scenes that make them remember him. Meanwhile, the police discover the lipstick camera that NoHo Hank put on the scene of the crime.
You know, you never know when you need to bust out a porno.
However, they are unable to access the footage in one of the 1,000 instances of the police being fucking worthless in the show. But this angers Detective Janice Moss, who decides to take matters into her own hands. Barry talks to Fuchs, and Fuchs learns about the murder attempt on Barry and wants to go on a warpath against them. Unfortunately, Barry takes a call from Sally outside the apartment, and Fuchs gets assaulted by the Chechens before taking out Barry as well. The Chechens force Barry to take a hit job, which Barry no like as he wants out of the criminal game. And if he doesn't take the hit job, Barry takes the job, saving Fuchs, but until he does it, Fuchs will be trapped with the Chechens. Ryan's father goes to the acting class's ceremony of Ryan, where he delivers a speech thanking the class for honoring him and ends up crying about who could have killed his son. Barry breaks down completely, feeling responsible for his deaths, but Sally thankfully ends up comforting him. This leads to them walking together to her house and not fucking, because that is for losers. But of course, a Chechen takes a picture of Barry walking her back. Anyways, Goran informs Hank that a new assassin has been hired, whose name's Stovka. Stovka, like NoHo Hank says, is the Greek freak of assassins. Bros Katie looking like a phase member. But we learn that Stovka is a human with zero passion for living or feeling any emotion anymore. The only reason why he hasn't killed himself is the natural urge to survive. He looks destroyed and completely rugged.
How old a guy are you, Stovka?
45.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Stovka hasn't aged too well. But the thing about this is that Barry is on the same pathway as Stovka, slowly getting more and more depressed about killing to the point of extremely suicidal thoughts. Barry has to pray to end up not having the same fate as Stovka. Detective Moss learns that Ryan Madison had an affair with Goran Pazar's wife, so they deduce the murder on the Chechens. What they still struggle with understanding is who murdered the Chechens on the scene of the crime committed by Barry. Moss decides to interrogate the entire acting class, where Barry skillfully avoids the suspicion. Now, Gene, being the Chet that he is, decides to rizz up Moss, who initially doesn't seem very receptive to it. Sally gets an audition for the We Bought a Zoo TV adaptation and ends up running into a coworker who steals the job from her. This prompts her to break down completely. Fuchs is able to charm Goran into releasing him, where they discuss how to take out the Bolivian Mafia, who are taking business away from them. They end up deciding to take out one of the Bolivian Mafia's stash house, which would require Barry. Meanwhile, Barry finally finishes the hit job and immediately gets laid. Woo! But before this, we get one of Barry's visions of the future. This one contains him and Sally walking to the store, where all the signs say soup, which is a reference to the earlier joke. Barry then hops on Facebook using a stage named Barry Block to find his old army friend Chris Lucado, who ends up sending a message asking to meet. Fuchs informs Barry, however, that an invasion on the Bolivian stash house must be done, upsetting Barry once again. Gene, all the while, being the Riz god, calls up Moss, claiming to have information about Ryan, but that it must be at a classified restaurant.
You know, I would use the same exact tactic to pick up girls, but instead, I would have texted them an address of a nuclear power plant. Can't believe they didn't want to fuck me.
During one of the acting classes, Gene calls out Barry for being emotionless and asks him to call back to some kind of past trauma, like his time in the army, which makes Barry motivated to go to Fuchs and tell him to fuck off.
Yeah, no, fuck it. I'm out.
So you're going back to Ohio?
Ohio, swag like Ohio.
Barry daydreams again and buys a laptop as a gift to Sally. When he arrives at Natalie's party, Sally, who is upset at her failures at trying to break through in acting, rejects the gift because, well, they pretty much have only been together for 4 days, so this rejection makes Barry call over Chris to come to the party because he just can't go without having some social connection. Chris brings over his dude bro friends Taylor and Vaughn, while Barry sees Sally talking to another man. This leads to an uncomfortable interaction, which leaves Barry dejected, and when entering his car, he finds Taylor in there with the stash house information in hand, wanting in on the job. Meanwhile, Jean just pulled a prank on Moss, using this Ryan information trick as a way to get closer to her, and this time Moss is finally sucked in on this. But when Moss returns to the police station, the lipstick camera is able to be unlocked and reveals an extremely blurry image of a tall man shooting the Chechens, meaning that they still have no idea who killed them. Barry decides to go to the carnival with Chris's family, where we continue to see his struggle to relate with him. Even with their army connection, Barry still feels alone. Chris has a family, and most importantly, he doesn't kill people. One thing to mention here is the joke about Chris not being able to aim in the carnival game to earn his kid a prize, even though he was in the army. Barry then comes in and wins like it was nothing. Not only is this a very funny piece of visual comedy, but it's also a fantastic visual for the differences between Barry and the people he wants to be close with. When Barry returns to acting class, Sally tells him that they should separate for some time and that he needs to work on his toxic masculinity.
My ex used to tell me that I had too much toxic masculinity. I mean, what even is that? I watch hentai and I have erectile dysfunction. How can I be toxic masculinity?
Detective Moss then interrogates the acting class to find a potential suspect on the lipstick cameraman, and Barry clutches up an alibi in a very comedic scene where Fuchs needs to act like a bunch of people to provide the alibi. Barry then discusses about what to do with the stash house with Fuchs, Hank, and Goram, where Fuchs tells him that he needs to kill Taylor as he knows too much about the game. Barry, however, tells him that he can't, because Taylor is a fellow Marine and well, not a bad person. I feel like this scene highlights the position that both Barry and Fuchs are in the first season. Fuchs doesn't care about anybody but himself, and maybe Barry, I guess, but at the end of the day, Fuchs just wants money. Well, Barry struggles with all the killing and only does it because he's been convinced that this is all he can do, and that he will only kill bad people. But when Barry finds something that he enjoys other than killing, which he doesn't even like, he immediately tries to distance himself from that life. Barry, being upset about the stash house, breaks out at the acting class during a performance on Macbeth about the morality of murder.
Are we really debating the morality of murder? I mean, that's what the play is about. Macbeth is a murderer.
Yeah, well then I guess so am I, right? I mean, I've killed people. Wait, I should just go blow my brains out because there's no hope for me, right? My soul's fucked because I was ordered to kill someone and I did it. You know, it doesn't make me a psycho.
No, Barry, you're overreacting. We didn't say you were a psycho.
You all just said that! Am I wrong? Isn't that what you guys are saying? I'm a fucking psycho? It's exactly what you fucking said.
Jean comes in to calm down the situation and defending Barry by saying that he was in a war and murder has to be done there and it doesn't make Barry a bad person. Moss can't seem to focus on the case, so she ends up going to Jean's house and, well, getting it on, I suppose. Meanwhile, Barry must get it on with Taylor and raid the stash house, which has probably the funniest line in cinema history.
Leroy Jenkins!
Barry gets knocked out and daydreams again before being woke up by Taylor, who secured the stash house and a metric ton of money. Barry tries to shoot Taylor in order to fulfill Fuchs' request, but can't bring himself to do it, and Fuchs predictably gets pissed. Hank and Goran force Barry and Taylor to intercept the leader of the Bolivian crime family, Cristobal Cifuentes. While Moss tells Jean that while she does like him, they must end their relationship and the investigation must go on. Barry goes to hang out with Taylor, who casually watches porn, which #relatable, might I say. Barry, trying to get out of the game, suggests that Taylor does solo work with Fuchs, to which Taylor rejects and tells Barry to kill Fuchs instead. Taylor gives the money from the stash house to Barry, who rejects it as it's dirty money. But while Barry's in the bathroom, Taylor sneaks it into his backpack. During the acting class, Barry apologizes for his breakout before checking his bag to see all the money in his backpack, causing him to panic and store it in the bathroom ceiling. Barry then performs Macbeth again with Sally, who obviously aren't on good terms. Gene, however, tells them to say I love you to each other in order to improve their performance in acting exercise, and I guess this manifests them into getting closer together again. Barry then decides to tell Taylor that he will do the intercept job himself, to which Taylor simply says okay. Moss, while thinking about Gene, then drops the case, deciding that love is too important for tracking down the killer of Ryan Madison.
It's probably the most realistic depiction of the LA Police Department of all time.
Anyway, Sally asks Gene for a better role to Macbeth play, while the Chechen who photographed her and Barry arrives right as Moss comes in to check on Gene. This leads to Moss chasing down Vacha and getting into a shootout, which results in Vacha being dead as hell and police finding Walter's drug money in the bathroom. Barry then finds out that Taylor, now dressed in an army uniform, has brought along Va, but more importantly Chris, along the airplane mission, feeling inspired by Gene's acting book Barry left at his house. Barry warns Chris to leave the vehicle, but it's too little too late, as Taylor decides to bum rush Chris of all and...
Smoke that motherfucker! Taylor, stop!
Man, that was some bad bum rushing. You're supposed to dive in, not drive in.
This leads into one of the best episodes in the series, and the best episode of season 1, loud, fast, and keep going.
That's what my ex used to tell me. Guess I never got the memo.
Barry and Chris survive the shooting, but are left in the desert, where a Bolivian soldier discovers them. Barry, unable to shoot him, tells Chris that he will kill him, or they're both dead. Chris reluctantly kills the Bolivian, breaking down afterwards. Cristobal then calls Goran, telling him that they are 2 dead soldiers, and that if he asked, he would have shared the stash house, because he's a great guy. He also says, though, that he did kill his men, so that means it's war. Noah Hank, not knowing Taylor brought some friends, assumes Barry is dead and tells Fuchs, causing him to break down. The police, however, are able to listen in on the call and point Barry as a main suspect before finding a copy of Ryan's book at Taylor's house, putting Taylor as the new main suspect. Barry arrives at the acting class struggling to deliver his one line, and then gets shitted on by Gene and Sally. Barry then meets Chris, and the first scene of the show that really has no comedic tone to it, instead it's just brutal and heartbreaking. Chris, breaking down over the fact that he killed someone, tells Barry that he won't know how to live on like this. Barry, however, tells him that he just needs to forget about it and act like it never happens, just like how Barry handles killing people. But unlike Barry, Chris is a normal person, one with a family, friends, and most importantly, he is not insane. Barry can deal with murder, he does it all the time. The human life isn't something he values or understands. Chris, on the other hand, is an innocent soul who values life, as he gave birth to one. Not literally, but he has a son, someone he must raise and bring into the world. Chris is just too far away from Barry to handle his lifestyle, and much like anyone else who enters the game, he won't be able to get out. To Barry, though, it isn't until Chris claims that he will turn himself into police where Barry knows that the fate of Chris has been sealed. When Chris says that, Barry knows what he must do. And he says this.
Okay, that's it. I'm going to the cops, and I'm going to tell them everything. And if I got to do some time, fine. But I'm coming clean. You're a fucking hitman, and then you fucking Facebooked.
Why'd you just say that?
I told you to get out of the car, man.
My fat trap shut. And then, you know, I promise you, no one will ever know any. Wait.
Barry then kills Chris and frames it as a suicide. Barry returns to the community center, and Sally informs Barry that she has a talent agent watching the performance and needs something to work with to impress them. Barry, however, falls apart before even getting on stage, as the guilt and grief over killing Chris is just too much for him. This leads into him getting on stage and delivering
My lord, the queen is dead.
Sally uses his tearful delivery in order to deliver an awe-inspiring performance, leaving the agent impressed. Gene praises Barry for his line, but Barry is just too upset over his second-place Fortnite placing to care. Sally thanks Barry and leaves the center, leaving Barry alone to stare into an empty audience. Barry, after having his East Sam Civil War pop-off moment, goes to Barry to insult him and tell him that he's leaving and exiting the criminal game. Fuchs, being the salty bitch he is, goes to Goron to work on a deal to kill him. Yes, the man you raised and loved your whole life just decided to leave your side, so you immediately decide to kill him.
I think he's a bad person.
But Goron, aware of the acting class, decides to stop working with Fuchs and instead locks him up to torture and then kill him, where he will then go after Barry himself. However, Hank doesn't agree with Goron's decision to kill Barry, and tells Barry about Goron's assassination plan, and tells him that they are going to kill Fuchs and that he should leave town. Moss then gets enough evidence to have a search warrant on Goron. Goron returns back to Fuchs, where he is enraged at the fact that Ruslan wasted time building a torture device instead of actually killing him. So Goron decides to do it himself, but it's too little too late, as Barry game ends Goron before he can kill Fuchs. He takes Fuchs to the airport and tells him to leave, and he's done being in the life of crime. Hank and the rest of the Chechens flee the crime scene and go to the Bolivians for safety, who thankfully accept him, as Cristobal is just such an amazing fella. The police come to the conclusion that Taylor and Ryan were involved in criminal gambling due to the money they found in the acting class, and that they were trying to put the Bolivians and Chechens at war. This ends up destroying their whole legacy, which indirectly harms their loved ones, and remember that for a later season. Barry meets Sally at the bar, telling her that he's done with the acting class, but Sally convinces him to stay by asking him to perform the adaptation of The Front Page. A few weeks later, Barry and Sally are a pair again and stay over at Gene and Moss's lake house, where Moss learns that Barry uses the stage name Barry Block. During dinner that night, Gene tells the story about Barry's monologue he gave to him during the nighttime when he was in his car. You know, the one about him being a hitman and serving in the army, which basically incriminates him.
He told me that what I was good at over there could be useful here. And, it's a job. You know, the money's good, and these people I take out, like, they're bad people.
This leads to Moss searching Barry Block on Facebook and finds photos with him and Taylor, as well as Chris. This leads to her deducing that Barry is the killer. But Barry, knowing she probably has caught on to him, finds her out on the lake and explains that he hates himself for doing what he did and that he's trying to change. He also states that he's a good person and is trying to live a normal life, and that arresting him would ruin it. Moss ignores it, telling him that it's over, forcing Barry to grab a silence pistol from the tree and killing Moss to save himself from being arrested. Barry returns to sleeping and tells himself that all of his crimes end
starting now.
Hey, Mike in there? Is he in there? Is he in there? Hey! Open up the fucking door!
That's season 1 of Barry, a really solid start. It sets up all the characters and themes of the show, but also provides a steady stream of laughs. Season 1 is by far the most comedic season of Barry, but it still has some good drama and solid dark moments, as well as some good action. All in all, it hooked me, and it sets up perfectly into what many consider to be the best season, Season 2. Let's begin.
What's up, guys? Good evening and shit. It's like 10:49.
Barry Season 2 picks up right after Season 1, with Fuchs out in Cleveland working with a new client, and let's just say that he may or may not have Persona 3'd himself. But things in Los Angeles aren't much better, as the acting class are completely out of the zone for the performance, as Gene has fallen into complete depression over the disappearance of Janice Moss. A little less depressing is the Hank storyline, as both him and Cristobal are thriving in their, as Hank likes to call it, 50-50 with Cristobal. But Hank is not too happy when Cristobal reveals that they're going to start working with Esther, leader of the Burmese Mafia. Barry goes to visit Gene, who has learned that the Janice Moss case has been closed due to a lack of leads. Barry asks Gene to come back to the acting class, but Gene could give less of a shit, stating that he is on the verge of suicide with a lack of reason to live. Gene is a selfish person, but Janice was a person that he cared for more than himself, and without her, Gene feels like he's incomplete. I mean, say what you want about Gene, but he did love her. Hank, however, gets a call from his family back in Chechnya, blaming the Bolivians for the death of Goron, but he ends up putting the blame on Esther instead of Barry, who he knows actually did kill Goron. Hank then goes to Barry to tell him that he must kill Esther, but Barry declines as he wants to be out of the game completely. The acting class attempts to get ready to perform the first page, but Gene shows up and cancels the performance, but also decides to shut down the class permanently. Barry tells Jean that he shouldn't shut it down and that they should use the class as therapy and work through their grief. Jean tells him that talking about Moss would be like talking about how he killed his first man. Barry, in an attempt to convince Jean to resume the class, then decides to tell the class about the first murder. While the class acts out the scene, they portray it in a Hollywood way, with Barry struggling to do it and crying after it, when in reality, it looked like that one RDR2 mission with Lenny and Arthur. You know, the one where you get pissed drunk? Jean decides to continue the acting class after seeing Barry open up. Sally praises Barry, but is unable to hang out because of her newfound success in Hollywood. But as Barry starts to leave the building, Hank is there to meet him, this time a little more threatening. He says that if Barry doesn't kill Esther, then he will reveal the truth to his family, and that he will be killed, forcing Barry to do it. Detective Loach, who is partners with Janice Moss, links the Fuchs DNA to the DNA at the tooth of the scene at Goron's murder, and links Fuchs to Barry, who matches the lipstick photo. The acting class all start to come up with their own personal pieces, and they all wish they could have gone to war to have a better story, like Barry.
And I wish I went to Chernobyl, so I could tell the story of how I got stage 4 brain cancer.
Jean announces that they will be performing their own emotional pieces as their next major performance. Barry, however, visits Jean, not wanting to tell his war story as he feels it doesn't represent him, as death and murder aren't exactly great things. Jean forces him into telling the story, before Barry says that he will tell the story about when they first met, to which Jean agrees because, well, it's a handjob to his ego. Sally, however, is struggling to get major roles with her new agents, who tell her to be patient, much to the dismay of her and Lindsay, her only female agent. Loach goes to Cleveland to talk to Fuchs and questions him about Barry. Fuchs denies knowing anything about Barry, but Loach then says that he will go to prison if he doesn't help him, forcing Fuchs to sell Barry out. James decides to stop being the egotistical fuck and tries to get in contact with an estranged son, Leo, who doesn't really want to connect with him because he thinks that Jean is selfish and is more interested in talking to Mirror than him. Jean decides to take this and actually prove himself, telling Barry that he will have to do the Afghanistan story, as the story about their first meeting would be too self-absorbed to Jean.
Wow, I didn't believe he could do it. But I guess he did.
Sally, however, uses the story about her abusive ex, named Sam, and how she moved on, but struggles with knowing what actually happened on the day she left him. Barry, on the other hand, attempts to kill Esther, but can't due to his PTSD from the war and decides to leave, but gets shot at from Esther's men. Barry returns to an apartment to find Fuchs attempting to repair their relationship, where Barry tells him to fuck off. We then learn that Fuchs is wired, and is trying to get Barry to confess to the murder of Janice. Anyways, Hank is surprised to see Esther alive, while Cristobal is pissed due to an assassination attempt on her. Hank decides to kill Barry after his failure to kill Esther because, well, he's gonna die if he doesn't. Meanwhile, Barry decides to change his monologue to be the time that he saved someone in the war, but ends up even being more traumatized as he remembers that Albert got shot, preceded by a murderous rampage. Every time Barry tries to turn something into a positive moral, there's always a caveat. I honestly just feel bad for him. Just fucking kidding, this guy. Sally, still trying to use the monologue about when she left her ex-husband, Sam, comes to the tragic realization that she didn't stand up to him and simply left him when he was passed out. I feel like a common theme here in the second season of Barry is truth. Both Barry and Sally's monologue involve them having to face the truth that both of their paths are not what they wish or wanted. Sally never stood up for herself, even though she believes she did, while Barry wants to believe that he never murdered a bunch of people, including innocents, in a blind rage. You know, the same thing as Sally's. Yeah, sure, Barry's story is a little more extreme, but both cover similar themes, while also criticizing Hollywood's portrayal of these events. But back on the plot train, Barry starts getting shot at, but is able to shoot back, injuring the shooter. Barry then confronts them, and it reveals that it was Hank and a hitman. Hank asks Barry to kill him as he doesn't want to be sent back to Chechnya, most likely to be tortured and then killed. But Barry, not wanting to shoot him, comes up with a way to pay Hank back with training up an army of killers so that Barry doesn't have to directly kill anyone. What Barry doesn't know, though, is that he's basically becoming a Fuchs, as he's going to end up training a bunch of hitmen, repeating the cycle he's currently trying to get out of. Hank accepts the offer though and does the whole 50-50 with Cristobal chant. Barry then realizes that his men are terrible, with none of them being able to hit a damn bottle. Fuchs goes to Barry to chat while working at the store, Lululemon, where Barry finally accepts Fuchs, with telling him the problem with telling the acting classes war stories. Fuchs ends up saying not to do it, as it would ruin his reputation with the class, and they bond over together again, putting Loach into a state of depression. Gene then tries to contact his son again, offering the lake house, to which Leo says no, as that place is connected to the murder of his loved one. Barry starts his monologue before Gene comes in and says it's just a monologue from Braveheart. This scene is really funny and well shot, so just shouts out to directing here. Sally then performs the scene about her abusive ex, where Barry has to play Sam. But Barry can't bring himself to do it, as it involves choking her, which you just can't do. Sally tries to get Barry angry, but he ends up storming out because of this. As Sally tries to chase Barry down and reconcile, Sam shows up, much to the dismay of both of them. Sam takes Barry and Sally out for dinner, where the tension is just ridiculous. Sally is trying to keep the situation from boiling, while Barry is on edge, about to commit murder on him. All this tension leads to an outburst while training Hank's men. You gotta release it somehow. When Sally and Barry are practicing Sally's play, she breaks down over the fact that she never stood up to him. Barry comforts her by saying that sometimes keeping things secret is okay, which is something that he has a lot of personal experience with.
Me personally, I tell everyone I committed triple homicide.
Detective Loach sets up a listening device at Fuchs' hotel and simply needs Fuchs to get Barry into the hotel. While Barry and Sally are rehearsing the play, Barry notices Sam hitting a mean stare. Barry chases him down, and Sam explains that he wants to hear her side of the story before telling him that he got that shit when it was tight.
Go.
You know, you're a fucking prick, man.
All right.
And don't forget, I fucked her first. I got it when that shit was tight.
That was a worse insult than a fucking mom joke. Like, come on, man. Do better next time.
Sam then calls Sally to come over to his hotel so that he can give her a gift, and while hesitant, she does go to the hotel room, where Sally gives her a flyer for one of her old high school performances. But Sally states that she is still doing the performance, which angers him, and he starts throwing a low-tier god rant at her. Barry is still enraged towards Sam's treatment to Sally, goes to kill him, and ends up almost shooting Sally, which makes him completely break down, realizing that he almost let his rage take him over and kill Sally. Fuchs calls Barry, telling him not to talk to him as he is wired, much to the confusion of Barry. Barry, needing some sort of emotional support, goes to his new father figure, Gene. Funny how Gene is more of a father to Barry than his own son. Anyways, Barry finally tells the real story when he saved Albert, where he went into one of his rages and killed an innocent man, which leads to him getting dispatched. But Gene then tells Barry about his own son Leo and how much of a selfish dick he was and a terrible father. Barry then asks Gene if he's a bad person, where we then get one of the best lines in the whole show.
But I don't want to be that guy anymore. And I pray that human beings can change their nature. Because if we can't, then you and I are in deep trouble.
What? How do we do that?
I think we're doing it already.
When Barry goes to Fuchs' hotel after this conversation, Fuchs tries to prevent him from, saying anything, but it's too late, as Barry admits to the murder of Moss, where Loach reveals himself, blowing Fuchs' cover, and then offers Barry a deal.
Do you have any idea what it's like to fucking love somebody and have some motherfucker come along and take them away from you? Do you?
I'm sorry about Janice.
Not Moss. That's Ronnie Broxton. He's fucking my wife. You get rid of him, all of this goes away. What?
What is one of the series' best episodes for the amazing cliffhanger and fantastic Gene and Barry scene, which describes one of the series' main themes. Can people change? Can people change? Is the question, and well, we have a whole TV show to answer it, so let's see. The next episode is called Ronnie/Lily, which is often considered the best episode in the series, and just one of the best episodes in TV history, with a 9.8 on IMDb. Now, what are my thoughts?
What do you think?
Ronnie / Lily is notable for its surreal tone to the entire episode, and its also incredible cinematography. The episode contains a long one-take action scene where Barry tries to get Ronnie to hide out back in his hometown of Chicago so that he doesn't have to kill him. The problem is that Barry saying this sounds like a psychopath, and also Ronnie is an extremely talented martial artist. They then start beating the shit out of each other in a hilarious scene which leads to Ronnie getting hit in the windpipe and then passing out. Barry then tries to leave the house where Lily, Ronnie's daughter, walks in much to the dismay of Barry as Barry thinks Ronnie is dead. Now this would be pretty devastating to think about. I mean, Barry just made this kid fatherless, right? Well, then Lily reveals herself to be a literal flying demon, pretty much, and beats the shit out of Barry before leaving in a darkly comedic scene. Barry then walks back into Fuchs' car with a stab wound where he slowly starts to bleed out. But when he tells Fuchs that Lily is still alive and knows that he killed Ronnie, Fuchs goes into murder the child mode and tries to get Barry to kill a literal child, which is just fucked up, man. Fuchs tries to kill her himself, which ends up with her climbing up the house and camping on top for like hours, to which Fuchs realizes that Lily is indeed a demon and not human. In one of the funniest and yet grossest scenes in the whole show, Fuchs attempts to tend Barry's wound using super glue.
Now, Fuchs, that is too far. I would have used cum, personally.
Lily then sneaks into the car, bites Fuchs' cheeks off, and then dips. They then go to a drugstore to get supplies for Barry's wound and to remove Fuchs' super glue as he super glued himself to the wheel. Inside the drugstore, we get the greatest plot twist in fiction. Ronnie is alive, and part 2 of Ronnie vs. Barry commences as the cops are called and arrive at the store. Ronnie ends up getting shot by Detective Loach, and with that, the menace finally dies. Loach, however, sees that Barry failed to kill him and yells for the other cops before Ronnie reveals that he survived the gunshot and roundhouse kicks Loach, killing him. Barry is in complete shock before Ronnie gets pounded by bullets, officially putting an end to the deity. And then Barry is able to escape, ending the surreal nightmare.
Ronnie / Lily is a hilariously dark episode that only uses 2 main characters, Barry and Fuchs. Ronnie / Lily is a wild ride and beautifully crafted, leading into one of the most insane episodes. But I think it's a little overrated. While being hilarious and containing some of the best action in the series, I do think it lacks that really emotional gut punch to make me really fall in love.
Anyways, the police come to the conclusion that the deaths of Loach and Ronnie are due to their personal relation, as Ronnie was interfering with his marriage. Barry then goes and finally cuts ties with Fuchs, which means sound the alarm, as Barry did something that was actually smart and for the betterment of himself and society as a whole. Fuchs goes into rage mode and states that he should have told him about the murder of Moss, where Barry says that Fuchs is nothing without him and that he's out of moves. Barry goes back to train Hank's men, who have improved significantly. Hank and his men celebrate the ending of his training in one of the funniest scenes. I mean, they're literally doing like some fucking like TF2 chant shit. One of the men, Maribek, thanks Barry for putting a purpose in his life, which is being a soldier. This is, in my eyes, an extremely dark scene, as Barry basically trained up another Barry without even caring or noticing. Sally tells Barry that she is going to perform a more truthful version of her leaving Sam, but ends up feeling too much shame and leaving. Barry then asks Gene how to improve his performance, and he tells him to use his own trauma to ignite stronger emotions. Fuchs then goes out to Gene's lake house, hoping to find any incriminating evidence on Barry as revenge, but struggles all night until finally finding the car containing the body of Janice. Sally misses an appointment with her agent in order to deliver her performance with Barry, but thanks to an amazing emotional performance by him, she's able to nail the scene. Her agent, Lindsay, is revealed to be watching it, and learns that this could help her get a career as the performance is just really good. As Hank plans the assassination plot, it's revealed that the accordion guy snitched on Hank, leaving his plot in ruin, as Cristobal and Esther are angered. Gene returns to the restaurant that him and Janice went on to their first date, where the camera pans to reveal that Fuchs is there as well, most likely about to talk to Gene about some incriminating shit. Sally gets a meeting with her agent to try to secure any roles, and when Barry comes to pick Sally up, he gets an audition for the next Jay Roach movie, The Swim Instructors, pissing Sally off as he never had to try to even get the role. He was just 6'2". When Sally goes in to get offered a role, she turns it down, as it's revenge porn about women killing their husbands for no reason other than, I don't know, shitty period pun. Barry goes to practice his role with Gene, in another gut-busting scene about the character arc his character goes through. Sally then rants in front of Barry later on about feeling all the pressure of Hollywood and what they expect out of a woman, while Barry just responds with,
Hey, Ike, you shitbird. You want a little pie?
While all this is going on, Hank and the Chechens are chained up in a bus, which gets lit on fire. While the Chechens are escaping the bus, Hank admits that he's not built for being a mob boss and simply is too polite and nice for it. He's kind of like an accountant, you know? He ends up passing out, but is saved by the Chechens, who successfully escaped from the bus thanks to Barry's amazing training. After they kill the accordion guy as revenge, they abandon Hank as he's seen as being weak and not built for the job.
Fucking losers. They don't see the brilliance in NoHo Hank.
Lindsay is able to secure the acting class a huge stage to perform in order to get Sally a wider audience. While Barry heads to his audition, he receives a phone call from Gene, saying he can't make it as someone told him a possible lead on the murder of Janice Moss. He then passes the phone to Fuchs. He insults Barry and tells him who is out of moves now. Barry then goes to the audition completely out of it and delivers the greatest line in TV history.
Well, forget her. You should just move on like you don't give a shit.
Oh, I'm gonna give a shit, alright? Literally.
Gene, while talking to Fuchs, says how Barry was lost and that he helped him find a purpose, which angers Fuchs and decides that he's just going to take him straight to Janice's car. He then reports the body, claiming that it's Gene Cousineau speaking, and reveals that the trunk has Janice's body in it, shocking Gene as Barry runs into the woods, hoping to get Fuchs before he can reveal any information about Janice's murder. Fuchs then sticks a gun to Gene's head. However, he can't bring himself to kill him and instead whispers something to Gene, who is still in shock and has fallen into tears. Barry and Gene get interviewed by the police, but let Barry go as he isn't a suspect in the murder case. Barry, however, asks about Gene, but Mae Dunn says that he's a prime suspect in the murder of Janice, much to Barry's dismay, as he then sends a death threat to Fuchs.
Man, I love sending death threats.
Hello, this is Domino's. How may I take your order?
I'm gonna fucking kill you.
Hank and the Chechens go to Esther's monastery to set up operations, where Fuchs asks to seek shelter there, and Hank accepts. Hank, however, receives a threat from the Chechen family, and if he doesn't kill Esther, he'll be killed. Barry calls the police, but they inform him that Gene is going to county jail, and Barry will be able to call him when he gets there. Barry, in complete rage, calls Fuchs and promises to kill him, where Fuchs says the first factual and beneficial statement, saying that Barry should turn himself in to save Gene. Fuchs then raises up the Bolivian and Burmese mafia, ending the duels between them and the Chechens, and starting the best romance in the show, NoHo Hank and Cristobal. Barry and Sally then perform their play in front of an audience, where Sally, to the surprise of Barry, takes over the play and changes it to a romanticized version where she does stand up to Sam. This version receives massive praise from the audience and agents. Barry calls Gene's son Leo, who tells him that Gene should be released from jail, which is revealed to be a plot as Barry planted a Chechen pin at Janice's body, putting the blame on them. He then says that he should inform Gene that he was right, that humans can change their nature, but unfortunately for character development, Barry gets a message from Hank that claims that Fuchs is at the monastery, which leads to Barry, in blind rage, shooting dear god anyone in his way to Fuchs in an amazingly well shot action sequence. I mean, look at this hallway shot. I mean, damn, it's just so well lit. Oh my god. It's so brutal and just cleanly shot. I love it, man. Fuchs is able to escape, as Mayor Beck knows him as Barry's mentor. When Barry enters the room, Mayor Beck hesitates to shoot him, as he trained him and, well, has a connection to him. But Barry does not care who you are in rage mode. Mayor Beck was a man who looked up to Barry, and Barry simply shot him with no hesitation. As Barry says, if you hesitate, you die, and Mayor Beck let his emotion show, unlike Barry, who has zero affection towards him and saw him as an end to a mean. Barry is unable to kill Fuchs, as he gets away in a van, while Batir, a member of Hank's family, finds him alive hiding behind a statue. Hank is spared as Esther is, well, dead as hell. As Barry walks through the hallway, he realizes the damage that he's done, and metaphorically and literally walks into the darkness as he realizes the chance of changing is gone. The question now isn't if we can change, but rather if we can be redeemed, which for Barry is something that looks a little darker, as when Gene returns home with Leo, he remembers what Fuchs whispered to him.
Barry Berkman did this. Oh my God.
Season 2 of Barry by many is considered to be the best season, and while I don't agree with that opinion, I gotta respect it, as Barry's sophomore season is amazing. It feels like a lot of the themes and questions Barry contains are revealed and dived into here more, and it's so satisfying. Combine this with the amazing directing and action sequences in Ronnie/Lily and Berkman is Greater Than Block, and you got a visually stellar season.
Barry Season 2 finds a great balance in both comedy and drama, and is really the only season of the show to have a perfect 50-50 split when it comes to that. Well, not my favorite season, it's wonderful. It's perfectly crafted, and I think it ends the first half of the Barry storyline really, really well. Seasons 3 and 4 are radically different in tone, which makes them a little more divisive among the fans, but they're personally my favorite seasons. So let's look at what caused such a radical shift in tone between seasons 1 and 2 and seasons 3 and 4.
Now, there was a large gap between seasons 2 and 3. Season 1 aired in early spring of 2018, and season 2 aired the year afterwards in spring of 2019. But the gap between season 2 and 3 was over 3 years, as an outbreak of Haute Blue Dwarf virus went on throughout the entirety of 2020, delaying the season to 2022, as filming would be forced to start in 2021. Now, both season 3 and season 4 were written in the large gap of these seasons, and in my opinion, the isolation and overall depressing vibes of 2020 contributed to the drastic shift in tone, as well as the overall stakes of the show just being higher. Also, something to notice is starting with Berkman is Greater Than Block, all the episodes are stylized in old lowercase, probably representing the more depressing tone of the series. So with all the Season 3 backstory covered, let's jump right into it. Season 3 starts off with a minor time jump of around half a year, and we see that Barry has fallen back into complete depression and contract killing in general. However, Barry is in the most completely delusioned state of his whole life, and picks up a contract where he assists a man kill Jeff, who fucked his wife.
There is now 3 hit jobs in the series that relate to someone wanting revenge for somebody fucking their wife. Perfect.
Anyways, while digging a grave for Jeff, Jeff is able to convince the man to forgive him. He then tells Barry that he forgives Jess and that there's no reason to kill him, to which Barry replies by killing them both and saying,
"There's no forgiving Jeff!"
We then transition to Hank, who is being interrogated by Detective Mae Dunn, questioning him about the pin that Barry planted. Hank, instead of calling out Barry, instead puts the blame on Fuchs, using the alias, the Raven, and calling him a master assassin.
Hank just loves Barry, man.
It's revealed that Fuchs is out in a cabin in Chechnya, being protected until the tensions have calmed in LA. Gene is interrogated, who tells Barry is involved with everything, including the closing of the acting class, another piece of evidence of the overall shift in themes and tone. We also learned that Sally has landed a deal to produce and write her own show, Joplin, a show based on her past in Joplin, Missouri, and her struggles with abuse. Barry then browses the dark web for Emmy jobs, but most of them are ridiculous and stupid. We then get a prime example of the comedy in season 3, which is really dark. A lot of the comedy is found in the dark and ridiculous scenarios rather than outright comedy in the first 2 seasons. Like this and the Forgiving Jeff scenes are very funny, but also dark and brutally depressing, as we see Barry fall back into his horrible habits and darkness overall. It's just something to note. Anyways, Barry goes to meet Sally on her set of Joplin, where he envisions her getting shot, showing more just how destroyed Barry's mental state is, as well as how bad the relationship is. Barry is completely emotionally unavailable, and more obsessed with killing than ever. Well, Sally isn't a saint either, as she spends more time caring about her show than the people she really loves. Yes, Sally isn't exactly blowing people's brains up, but she isn't exactly improving herself, and is still as selfish as ever. Barry then goes to Hank, who has moved in with Cristobal and is dating him. Barry asks for any work, as he feels nothing and needs some purpose, but Hank rejects him, basically telling him the plot of Berkman is Greater Than Block. Barry gets a text from Gene telling him to come over as he loads and prepares the gun he once thought to use to kill himself with. Leo, however, seems confused by his father's behavior and gets no answer from Gene himself. All he gets is a mysterious farewell. They then meet at the abandoned acting class building, where he tells Barry that he knows everything, but fumbles the bag, fucking up his gun. Barry then takes Gene's to the outskirt where he buries all of his bodies, intending on killing him, but Gene tells him that they can get through this and that he can earn forgiveness. Barry then realizes what he can do to earn redemption, and tells Gene to get into the trunk. Forgiving Jeff is a dark and depressing episode with some darkly comedic scenes, but it sets up a new theme for the rest of the series: forgiveness, and if it can be earned. For now though, we'll just have to see. So let's move on to the next episode, Limonada. Barry buys Gene some food while telling him to stay in the trunk. He then goes to Sally and tries to get Gene a job on her show to revive his career as redemption. Sally states that she tried, but the writers believe he's difficult to work with and past his prime. Barry then, well, gets a little angry.
Which is why I tried to get him on my show. We're saying the same thing.
We are not saying the same thing! We are not saying the same thing! If I don't do this, I don't live! I have to do this to fucking live! Do it.
Okay, I see.
Do it!
Now Barry is in the obvious wrong here, as he's a complete toxic loser abuser, but Sally really doesn't care about Gene's career. She knows that Gene is talented and worth her at the helm of her own project would probably be fine to work with, but she doesn't care and only wants what would benefit her. And Gene would take effort and convincing to the higher-ups, so to her, it's a waste of time. Barry attempts to get Gene a job, though, by going to the casting director for swimming instructors, but they deny Gene a job for the same reasons as before, but offer Barry an audition for a new TV series because, well,
he maxed out his luck stat in New Vegas.
Cristobal goes to buy lemonade but gets interrupted as the family head Fernando comes to talk to him. Fernando says that Cristobal needs to kill the Chechens, who they believe did the monastery shootout, and then send Cristobal back to his wife and kids, which alarms Cristobal as his newfound love of Hank might be in danger because of that. We then get the worst character in the series. Katie is a fine character, but her entire script is basically telling Sally how dangerous and toxic Barry is, which is fine. I think it's important for someone to mention how toxic the relationship is, but that's all Katie is, and she constantly talks about it. In nearly every scene, she's constantly talking about how Barry is super dangerous and abusive, which gets really annoying. I mean, is she wrong? Fuck no. But also, other than his early outburst in Limonada, she knows nothing else about Barry, and it gives me total she has seen the show vibes. If they gave her more character and shortened the Barry's abusive arc, then I would like her better, but as of now, she's just pretty boring. Anyways, Sally's show gets moved up to premiere earlier, as another show about abuse is coming out, which stresses her out. Soon, Cristobal's men raid the Chechen flower shop base, but thanks to a tip from Cristobal, are able to make it out alive. When Hank returns to the house, Cristobal tells him to flee as Fernando will come and kill Hank, an emotional scene that I really like as it expands Hank's character. Not to say Hank was bad in the first seasons, but he was mainly just comedic relief. The greatest comedic relief character of all time, but still comedic relief. But in season 3, they expand his character a lot, showing him more of emotions and expanding upon his insecurity of not being an intimidating mob boss. Does he want a happy life with Cristobal, or to be a master crime lord? And I think it's really interesting. Back to the plot, Barry performs his audition, but asks him if they can get Gene a job, but they reject him once again. Barry then proclaims that Gene saved his life, as before he was lost coming out of the war, but that his acting class gave him a new purpose. This emotional story is able to convince them to give Gene a role, and also himself a role. Barry then calls Sally, who apologizes for not being considerate, while Barry fails to even mention his gamer range.
I think Barry's not mentally there. Just a feeling.
When he opens the trunk, he notices that Gene is not there at all. Gene then runs through the neighborhood where he gets eaten by dogs, asking a waitress to help him. This is before Barry shows up and then gets into a car accident. I don't know, what a fever dream. Gene arrives at his house, where Barry is already there, and what happens next is some next level psycho shit. Barry tells him that if he doesn't accept his second chance at a career, that both his son and grandson are dead. He then asks Gene if he loves him.
Can you say it? I love you, Barry. Can you say it again?
No. Barry and Gene prepare for the role where Brian, the showrunner, tells Gene that even though they have a rough history together, that he's willing to give Gene a second chance, which is another connection to the themes of redemption. Barry then asks Gene to thank him for giving him another opportunity. He threatened to kill his kid, by the way. Batir is at the heroin operation and angry at the Bolivians for trying to kill them, and tells Hank that they should target Cristobal. Hank, not down for that, decides to use Fuchs as the scapegoat and calls him to say that he can return. But Fuchs ain't down to come back, as he's enjoying his new life with his new lover out in the mountains. Cristobal, however, is able to convince Fernando to not attack the Chechens, and instead just go back to Bolivia. Sally and Katie do some press interviews that are basically just satirizing the fuck out of Hollywood. I don't really care for these scenes. I don't know, they're just kind of boring to me. I don't really find them that interesting. They're very on the nose. I don't know, could have been better. Batir buys a bomb to use in order to blow up Cristobal, but Hank tries to put the blame on Fernando, but Batir doesn't buy it. Hank calls Barry in order to help him with the bomb, but Barry declines, putting Hank into panic mode. Barry then receives a call from Fuchs, still bittered over their beef, asks for an apology, to which Barry declines. Fuchs gets pissed off and insults his relationship with Gene, as he states that he ruined his life, which is once again true.
Barry, you are literally getting outed by Fuchs? Like literally the worst human ever born on the planet. How the fuck do you let this happen?
Gene then slaps Barry and tells him to get the fuck out of his life. This makes Barry accept the job that Hank offered, much to the dismay of Batir. In Chechnya, Fuchs tells his lover that he wants revenge on Barry, to which she tells him a fable about forgiveness. Fuchs doesn't get it and instead seeks revenge. Also, watch out for this revenge versus forgiveness thing. It's a very relevant theme coming into the second half of season 3, so watch out. The next episode opens with a flashback to the first episode, with Barry killing the husband of Julie. It then flashes forward to the present, where we see her in a much more depressed state. Fuchs arrives under his detective disguise to offer Julie and her son Kyle information about the murder of her husband. He also goes to Ryan Madison's father to tell him that Barry stole his son's life. Gene, paranoid and scared for his son's life, tells him to leave LA, but with no concrete answer why, Leo doesn't agree. Gene then meets his agent Tom, who says that they loved his performance and want to offer Gene an extended part for the show. While at the store, Joe Montana, I think is his name, a real-life actor who remembers Gene for being an asshole, talks to him. But after reading the story on Variety magazine that paints Gene in a positive light, he decides to squash the beef with him and invites him to a dinner. But Gene, worried for his safety, insists that he leaves LA, declining the invitation. Barry meets with Hank in order to illustrate the plan to game in Fernando, but Hank's henchmen want to kill every Bolivian in sight. Hank instead plans to get Cristobal out of blast radius when Barry goes to blow up the bomb. We then get the funniest scene in season 3, where Barry tries to detonate the bomb using a Bluetooth app in a very surreal, over-the-top scene that reminds me of the comedy in seasons 1 and 2.
How can I help you today?
Yeah, my app isn't syncing with the Bluetooth on the device I'm trying to detonate.
Sure, okay, I can help you with that. What's your username?
Berkman goes boom, capital B, capital G, capital B.
Fernando then reveals to Cristobal that he knows he's being unfaithful and gives him a choice. Either Cristobal kills Hank, or he kills Cristobal. This leads Cristobal to run right as the bomb blows up everyone besides Cristobal, who does get a little crispy. We then check in on Sally for the Joplin premiere, which receives critical acclaim, while the rival show gets crapped out by Rotten Tomatoes and another Hollywood parody scene. Katie then tells Sally that Barry is abusive to her, which makes Sally think about breaking up with him, because Sally needed to be told that Barry was abusive. I don't know, I don't really care for this plot. Barry then brings Cristobal to Hank, who gives him $250,000 in return for the bomb. And after seeing their love for each other, I guess Barry has a slight change in heart. He returns to Gene and apologizes for keeping him hostage, and gives him the $250K, and tells him that he'll never see him again.
Wow. Barry did something good.
When Leo talks to Gene, Gene tells him that they're staying in LA, Barry then goes to Sally and apologizes for being a shit boyfriend, but it's too little too late, and Sally breaks up with him as his early outburst was just too dangerous and alarming. Julie and Kyle then decide to buy a gun in order to exact revenge on Barry, choosing revenge over forgiveness. A flashback sees Barry save Albert's life, as it flashes forward to reveal that Albert is indeed alive and working as an FBI agent intending to find out who killed Janice Moss. When Mae Dunn tells him that the Raven did it, Albert rejects it and instead thinks of Barry as a potential link. Barry moves in with his old roommates while also asking for relationship advice from Cristobal and Hank, who tell him to be a little more sincere. Joplin becomes a success on Banshee, the streaming service, but quickly gets overshadowed by a new show, which shits on the viewership, making it completely irrelevant. This angers her, and when asking help from the executives, they tell her the algorithm hates her show, and then it doesn't garner enough attention, making her even more pissed off. Natalie comes in to comfort her, saying that at least she made a good show, and all her work is on display. Cristobal's wife Elena shows up, planning to find her husband and raiding the Chechens. Immediately afterwards, they raid the plant shop. Well, Batir is live streaming it to the Chechen family in Chechnya, which angers them. Hank is alerted about the attack as Elena arrives at their house to kidnap Cristobal. This forces Hank to hide in a closet in a beautifully depressing scene where Anthony Carrigan gets to stretch his acting chops. It's so well performed. Gene, no longer feeling the pressure of Barry, goes to the dinner party. He apologizes for his bad actions in the past and also apologizes to Annie, a director he used to date. She doesn't accept the apology and instead insults him by stating he ruined her career and blacklisted her from the industry. Damn, bro, that's fucked up, man. Fuchs then gets Taylor's motorbike gang and sister to get on Barry's ass, as he says that Barry owed Taylor money. Unfortunately, Fuchs gets shot by them, and they leave him to die. Barry goes back to his house, where Kyle and Julie try to kill him, but Kyle fumbles under the pressure and let Barry get into his house. Barry consoles Sally, who is crying over her show's failure, but tells her that, well, he can do some interesting stuff to the executive.
Oh, she'd never know I was there. You know, the whole point is to isolate her and make her feel like she's going insane. So I would just do little things, like replace her dog with a slightly different dog, or, change the furniture in her house so she thinks she's shrinking. Basic stuff. Most of it I learned in the military, some of it on a subreddit.
Sally then leaves, which is completely understandable. Julie then gets ready to shoot Barry, but instead shoots Kyle in the stomach, most likely killing him. This scene is dark, depressing, and flat out sad. A family destroyed by guilt, sadness, and revenge, all because Barry didn't value the life of a man. Barry didn't want to kill anyone, but his past will always catch up to him. The next episode is 710N, and is one of my personal favorite episodes, as it contains an amazing chase scene. So let's get into it. Albert denies that the Raven or Hank are involved in the murder of Moss, and connects the dots between the evidence and Barry. He then visits the widow of Chris, Sharon, and her son to learn where Barry is, and learns that he's doing acting classes. Sharon calls Barry, saying they should meet up for a dinner for veterans, to which Barry accepts. Hank goes to a vignette shop ran by a man named Mitch. Hank asks for advice on what he should do about him and Cristobal, who he has said he never told him he had a wife. Mitch tells him that he's cool and they should work together, but Hank instead decides to go to Bolivia to save Cristobal. Tom tells Gene about a potential job with a streaming service called Gene's Masterclass. Gene accepts only if Annie works on the project. However, when he goes to Annie, she declines the job offer until Gene offers her all the money from the project, to which she accepts.
Money. That's how you do it.
Fuchs gets rescued by a family, who take care of him and nurse him back up to health. Also, the farmer's daughter falls in love with him, and he gets to work with Dotes.
If I had a nickel for every time Fuchs lived on a farm with a bunch of Dotes and had a beautiful young woman fall in love with him in season 3 of the hit HBO show Barry, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
Anyways, Fuchs gets a call from Jin Moss, the father of Janice, wanting information about his daughter's death, but Fuchs declines, liking his new life and wanting to move on. Sally gets offered a job to work on the show that replaced Joplin on the front page, and after some talks with her agent, she reluctantly accepts. Fuchs talks with the father of Anita, his new lover, and he tells him that sometimes you gotta follow the signs that God gives you. A beautiful statement, and one that Fuchs should use to improve his life and move on from Barry. Just fucking kidding. This guy sees a newspaper about Barry and takes it as a sign from God to continue his warpath against him. Barry goes to the vignette shop to purchase some vignettes, and Mitch gives him some advice. Barry then hits the road to head over to dinner for the veterans, but gets chased down by the motorcycle club. We then get, in my opinion, one of the best chase scenes, and just overall one of the best scenes in Barry. I can gush about the cinematography and just how well edited it is. I mean, oh my god. But for now, look at this GTA-ass camera shot. Anyways, Barry takes out all of them one by one very slowly, and when he arrives at the dinner, he sees Fuchs' detective card and Sharon staring directly at him very coldly. Barry asks what she put in the vignettes as he slowly falls unconscious and poisoned. Barry wakes up barely alive as he walks out of the house and starts hallucinating on a beach in a beautiful scene showing all the people he has ruined. While leaving the writer's room, Sally notices that Natalie got her own series called Just Desserts, which contains some very similar plot beats to her own show, but is meant to suck off the algorithm. This leads into one of the best outbursts in the whole show.
My story! You don't even have a fucking daughter!
Neither do you, Sally.
Oh, you are nothing without me! You are nothing! Nobody! Stupid piece of shit! I brought you into the fold and this is how you fucking betrayed me!
I moved your carrots for you.
You entitled You entitled fucking You entitled fucking
Shoutouts to Sarah Goldberg for this performance. Gene then performs his show along with Annie, who is happy about her new job. Hank arrives at Bolivia and tries to find any leads to their headquarters, but he ends up getting knocked out and taken there to be a prisoner, so I guess job failed successfully. Sally's outburst against Natalie was recorded and released onto the internet, which is not a good look to her. She is labeled as the entitled C-word girl, and forces a backhanded apology, which is better than half the YouTuber apologies, I guess. After all this drama, Lindsay quits Sally's manager, as she's too honest, which can't sell. Fuchs then goes to Jim Moss's house to exact some Barry revenge shit, but this bites him in his ass, as it was a trick to get him turned into the police. Jim Moss is a master at psychological torture, so keep that in mind. Jim believes that Fuchs was simply trying to frame Barry, but learns that Gene also blamed Barry for the death of Janice, so his suspicions for Barry increases. Jim then questions Gene, asking if Barry is a good person, which makes Gene sweat, confirming his suspicion. Barry, still in a non-functioning state, gets picked up by George, Ryan's father. George has a gun on him and states he still thinks about Ryan and how he turned his life around for the better and how proud of him he was. He laments his death and tells Barry just how much he hurt him. Barry then visions the beach again, seeing Chris. This is all before George kills himself, leading to the hospital coming and saving Barry's life.
You know the sound of kids' footsteps early in the morning? I still hear it. I can hear him in his room on his computer. I'll talk to him from my office across the hall. Full conversations. My wife says I'm losing my mind. She thinks the city turned him into some devil. I never wanted to hurt anyone my whole life. Until we had Ryan. The love I had for that child. What would I do if something happened to him? And then I found out what you did. And I could leave you here and you'll rot. But I can't.
Well, George hates Barry for taking away his son, and in turn, most of his joy leading to his suicide. He offers Barry a chance, something that everyone else exacting revenge didn't. While Barry is a horrible person, redemption is something still there, and George is the only one who offers Barry a chance. A chance not to change, but to redeem, and save his life while in turn taking his own, in hopes to see his own son. It's a powerful scene and beautifully brutal, and I love it. Albert then interviews Fuchs with the cameras off, who admits that he turned Barry into a hitman and gives a hint that Barry killed Chris, leading to Albert grabbing his gun and leaving to find him. Barry has one more hallucination, seeing both Jean and Sally. Barry arrives home after recovering, where he finds Sally, who has asked him to do the torture he mentioned earlier on Natalie. Fuchs gets sent into prison as the pin is claimed to him, the Raven, but Dunn remains sus about what Albert did with no cameras on. Jim then forces Jean to come over to talk. He then asks Jean if he loves his daughter, and if he loves Barry, and protecting him in a intense as hell scene that is also darkly funny. Back at the apartment, Barry and Sally are talking about ways to exact revenge before a surviving member of the motorbike club attacks them, knocking out Barry briefly and attacking Sally, who is forced to kill him. But in complete rage, she not only kills him, but also Barry then pulls her back in, and in a traumatized state, Sally can only nod to Barry, saying that it's all his fault for this. But Sally has killed someone. She's now stained. No matter what happens in the future, Sally will be forever destroyed, as the PTSD from this will forever affect her. Sally is not Barry. She's somewhat normal. Selfish, yes, but not psychotic. Killing someone even in self-defense will forever affect her no matter what. The PTSD is just too strong. Meanwhile, in Bolivia, Hank finds out that he's also been imprisoned with a bunch of his henchmen. But the joy doesn't last long, as the Bolivians release a panther, killing all his henchmen in a scene with zero comedy and a complete horror tone. It's a dark and fucking brutal scene, man. And once again, hard praise to Anthony Carrigan for his amazing performance. Hank, however, is able to escape his chains and kill the beast. He then goes to save Cristobal, who is going through gay conversion therapy. Hank then shoots Elena and the rest of the men, leaving him and Cristobal together again, but in a completely emotionally destroyed state. Barry buries, get it, the body of a man Sally killed before Albert arrives. He then yells at Barry and berated him for why he killed Chris and where he fell and went wrong and became a hitman. All Barry can do though is whine and cry with no response. But he decides to forgive Barry, as he saved his life and in turn gave life to his son. But he says that he needs to stop being a hitman, starting now. Albert gives Barry another chance, so let's see what Barry does with it. Barry then calls Sally at night, hoping that they'll move together to be safe, but it's revealed that she's taken a plane back to her hometown, Joplin, Missouri. Jim then calls Barry, wanting to talk to him, but Barry hangs up. Jean then calls him, saying that he has a gun, and that Jim is going to ruin their entire lives. Barry, not wanting Jean to kill anyone and falling into the game, decides to kill Moss. One more kill, and everything will be fine, right? Well, like Albert said, it's gotta end starting now. And Barry failed. It's revealed that this was all an act, and it was a ploy to get Barry arrested. Barry finally gets caught, and all of his luck is finally ended. The final shot of the season has the cops clear out the area, while Jim and Jean are standing. As the shot continues, Jean leaves the shot. It's only Jim left. But notice the tree in the window creating a border between Jim and the photo of Janice? Well, Jim got his justice, the effects of Barry's crime still lingers. And no matter what Jim does, there's still an emptiness in his heart without her in his life. It's a beautiful way to end the season, and just so well done. Season 3 in my eyes is my second favorite season, and I love it for its amazing directing and dark tone. I love the comedy of Barry, but I'm more into the dark themes and brutal dramatic moments, and Season 3 brings that in spades. To me, Season 3 is when the show gets more experimental and horror influence and lessens the comedy. It's still here, and I find the Season 3 to be very funny, but it's definitely more dark than any other season, besides Season 4.
Season 3 is the beginning of the end game, and it also introduces the question of whether Barry can be redeemed. It also answers it with no. Because of this, fans wondered if the show should even continue. I mean, Barry gets sent to prison. What are they supposed to do? That's literally the ending. Well, to me, there were still more lingering threads and things to explain. Well, Barry can't be redeemed. What about everyone else? What will happen to them, and how will Hank handle his trauma? I mean, there's plenty still left. And while Barry's redemption arc is over, his revenge plot isn't. You know, to me, Season 3 was answering a question, but not explaining it, and I think that's what Season 4 does. To me, Season 4 is more about handling and tackling trauma, rather than if someone can be redeemed. So, let's hop into it, shall we?
Season 4 picks up right where we left off with Barry in prison. Barry decides to give a call to Gene and tell him that he loves him, and with this, Barry is ended full psycho. I mean, he was kind of already psychopathic, but here he really is. Anyways, Gene and Jim then meet with their attorneys, and Jim tells Gene that he must not talk about Janice Moss or Barry in order to preserve the case, and Gene agrees. We then catch in on Sally, who has finally arrived in Joplin, where she learns from Lindsay that Barry was arrested for the murder of Janice Moss. This puts Sally into complete shock and has a mental breakdown with her mom. And Sally's mom gives the best response you can give to your child if they have a breakdown.
We all done? We are, thank you, honey. Oh, could I get some chili cheese tots to go?
Yeah, Sally's mother is a terrible parent. And also really selfish, which is probably how Sally got so egotistical.
It's revealed that Fuchs is put into the same prison as Barry, and continuing his revenge plot, he tries to land a deal with the authorities. They say that if he can get Barry to confess while he's wired, they can grant him an early release. Fuchs then tries to get Barry to confess his crimes. But Barry, disillusioned and feeling betrayed by Gene, admits to Fuchs that he was right, and regrets taking the acting classes, which moves Fuchs greatly. Hank and Cristobal are revealed to have stopped being in the crime business and have moved to Santa Fe. But learning about the drought and high-quality sand for construction, Cristobal suggests that they import it, which Hank, doesn't quite like. Hank is still suffering from the PTSD of the events in Bolivia, and still wanting a connection with Barry, calls him, who gets a response from a different person, and learns about his arrest. This then triggers him to decide to move back to LA and start the sand business. We then are greeted to Sally's old home, and Joe, her father, who is a much better person than Sally's mother, but struggles to connect or recognize Sally's suffering, so he's not really the best parent. The family then watches Joplin, which triggers Sally's mother for the usage of Sam's name. This leads to Sally lashing out, calling her out for her bullshit. Barry enters the prison bathroom and breaks down mainly because of self-hatred for all the crimes he's done, but also the fact that, you know, he got caught. In fact, he's so depressed and full of self-hatred that he purposely angers a security guard so that he can get beaten up.
Way to go. Fuck! Look, I know they say you did a bad thing, but I'm sure you're not a bad guy.
I'm a fucking cop killer. If I saw you walking down the street, I'd fucking kill you. I'd kill your fucking kids. I'd kill your fucking wife. And I'd kill your fucking mom.
Yes, I hate Barry. He's kind of a terrible guy, but Bill Hader plays him so well that in scenes like these, I kind of feel bad for the guy, and I hope he can turn it around. In fact, the security guard even says that though he committed these crimes, he can change, and deep down, there is a good person inside. But Barry's just kind of over putting an effort into changing and instead just wants to self-loathe. Barry will get beaten up as a childhood dream before getting saved by Fuchs, who uses his informant status to drive the guard away before tearing the wire and hugging Barry, apologizing for all their beef in a surprisingly emotional and tearful scene. Finally, Fuchs no longer wants to kill Barry, thank fucking God. Then we transition into Gene, who, unlike Fuchs, can't seem to abandon his obsession with fame, and calls the Vanity Fair reporter, Lon O'Neill, to tell him his story about Barry in a move that will ruin the case against Barry, so good fucking job. God damn it, Gene. Anyways, we open the next episode with a flashback, which contains Barry's father introducing him to his friend, Fuchs. We flash forward to the present, where Fuchs gives up being an informant and tries to start a gang to protect him and Barry, under the name The Raven.
The Raven is the greatest gang name of all time, and if anyone disagrees, go fuck yourself. The chum bucket's over there, fella.
Cristobal goes to contact Bong, What a weird name. A former associate in crime, and convinces him to join him and Hank's new sand endeavor. He then has to tell Bong, though, that he has to work with a rival gang, and in order to convince him to work together, he takes Bong's gang and a rival gang to the bestest place on earth, Dave & Buster's. I mean, D&B is fun, but the food there, the burgers are not that great. Yeah, honestly, I don't know if D&B is the bestest place on earth. But you want to know what is great? The scene at D&B, which is one of the only comedic scenes in the whole final season, so thank God for that, or I might have died from the amount of tension and drama. It's just so well shot, the dialogue here is hilarious, we get some great Hank and Cristobal interaction, it's just so fantastic.
We were at war with the Chechens. They belittled us, fought us, stole from us, completely destroyed our operations. But now, we're fucking.
Hank then contacts Toro, a crime lord with henchmen that can bust Perry out of prison. When Hank reveals his plan to Cristobal, he is disappointed and confused by his obsession with Barry. Meanwhile, Gene tries to lead Lon O'Neill to the acting class, but Lon O'Neill beats his note chase, so Gene just immediately takes him there. Gene then tells Lon O'Neill a very dramatic version of the Barry story with almost no real connection to reality. Barry then gets a visitor, who turns out to be Sally. First of all, she learns about the status of the biker that she killed before Barry admits that he's a piece of shit and one of Bill Hader's best performances. He then wonders why Sally won't leave, and then she states that, well, she feels safe with him. Barry, being completely not there in the head, then asks what she said and to repeat it, but Sally leaves. Barry daydreams about a life with Sally after getting a little hope from Sally visiting him, and decides to become a rat in exchange for his safety and another person. It's Sally. Gene finishes his lied-filled performance and tells Lon O'Neill that he must be anonymous. It's revealed that Sally was watching the performance and begs for Gene to tell him why he never warned her about Barry's hitman status. Gene tells her that they were both victims, and if he told her, he probably would have been killed. Gene also recommends that while her career might be over, she can always become a teacher. Hank and Cristobal argue over Hank's obsession with Barry, with Cristobal telling Hank that he never cared for him and that Barry just isn't his friend. Hank then gets a call from Fuchs to tell him that Barry has betrayed him and that he's ratting out Hank and Fuchs, which makes Hank make the swift decision of killing him. Woo! Even when Fuchs is doing something good, he's still a freaking hypocrite. Hank and Cristobal Sands' business are starting to thrive as Hank goes to meet Toro in a Guillermo del Toro cameo. It's great, man. This scene just screams early Barry energy and is very funny. Anyways, here Toro gets the podcast bros to take the job of killing Barry, which screams with the vibes of maybe not gonna go too well. The district attorney tells Gene that Barry is taking a deal with the FBI, but if Gene doesn't speak, they should have the evidence on their side.
Gene is so fucked.
Gene then tells Tom, while driving, that he spoke to Lon O'Neill, which triggers Tom to crash the car and lament to Gene for even telling Lon anything. Barry then gets visited by Lon O'Neill, wanting his side of the story, but Barry is somehow smarter than Gene and he doesn't say shit about his story. Barry also throws another beautifully acted baby rage as he tells Lon O'Neill to tell Gene to shut the fuck up.
What's he saying? He's saying that you killed her. You kidnapped him. And that you threatened his family. It's really just your chance to say your piece. I'm only trying to be fair here.
You know be fair? You know be fucking fair? It's if Gene Cousteau stops telling my life story. That's what be fucking fair. Tell Gene Cousteau to shut his fucking mouth!
Lon O'Neill then goes to Jim Moss for his story and tells him that he already spoke with Gene. This then prompts Jim to psychically torture old Lonnie boy and make him only speak German, which makes his wife potentially destroyed. Sally then starts the acting class where she falls under the pressure that they only came here because of her controversy. Also, side note, the Morbite guy that Sally killed appears in one of the wide shots here. The students then comfort her, which makes Sally a lot more comfortable and, well, be able to actually teach better. But this leads to a problem. Her methods are a little abusive. This leads to bullying the student Kristen into a better performance. This abuse then triggers the students to all leave. Well, besides Kristen, who has already booked a gig, meaning she has no choice but to work with Sally to improve her acting, as she's not very talented. Hank informs Fuchs that Barry will be killed later on, and all he needs to do is shut up and not talk. But then Hank is jump scared by Batir, who has arrived and tells him that Hank's criminal operation must end or he will be killed, which puts a lot of stress on him. Barry then calls Hank, saying he must kill Gene as he has information on him. This is when Hank finally calls out Barry for his bullshit, in a satisfying moment of Hank shit-talking. It's funny that all Barry can say is fuck, basically. So shouts out to that. Fuchs watches Rain Man, feels a connection to the film. It's about a guy mentoring an autistic man.
I wonder who Barry is to Fuchs.
Fuchs then decides to alarm the prison guards about the hit on Barry, but his claims are immediately dismissed, and he gets beaten the shit out of him. Barry then attends a meeting with the agents, where Barry notices that one, played by the Cranky Kong voice actor, is sweating profusely. Barry correctly assumes that he's here to kill him, and the Cranky Kong voice actor attempts to shoot him with one of his gadgets, but of course it goes wrong, and he shoots his hand off. Everyone then gets killed by the other hitman who's in the ceiling, but Barry is able to grab a pot, defend the bullets, grab a gun, kill him, and then uses this to escape the prison.
This is probably one of the best action scenes in the entire show. It's so well directed, it's hilarious, it's brutal, it's so good. Also, something to notice is that every single season 4 episode was directed by Bill Hader. Probably explains why it's so, I don't know, beautiful.
The next episode is It Takes a Psycho, which is tied for my favorite episode. It's an episode that contains almost no Barry presence besides the final scene, and is really interesting because of that. So with that short little intro, let's hop into it. Fuchs gets the shit beaten out of him by the guards and is questioned as they believe he had an involvement with Barry's escape. Hank and Cristobal increase their security as they learn that Barry has escaped as well. You can just tell that Hank is under so much stress because, I mean, every action he does just yells paranoia. Anyways, they celebrate with all the men for the success of the sand business, and Hank looks a little sus. Tom, Jim, and Leo lock Gene in his lake house so that he can't talk about the case, which may ruin it, angering Gene. Gene asks Leo if he can at least go to a local cafe and pick up some coffee, I guess, but Leo tells him no. Gene then learns about Barry's escape, prompting him to camp in front of the door with Rip Torn's gun. We then get a little too on-the-nose scene where Sally and Kristen are on a set of Mega Girls, a superhero blockbuster. The director is Sean Hayter, the real director of Coda, a critically acclaimed movie. I've never seen Coda, but it's probably good. This is clearly a parody on the Eternals director, Chloe Zhao, who went from Best Picture winner No Man Land to directing a mediocre blockbuster in Eternals. Side note, Eternals, it's pretty garbage. In my eyes, it's pretty forced and way too on the nose and stands out in a very emotional episode. Not to say it's like terrible or anything, I don't know, it's not very good commentary. I don't really think a lot of the Sally's side plot shit is really good commentary on Hollywood. It's fine, it's nothing terrible. Anyways, Sally tries to earn an acting gig by reciting the line that Kristen must perform, but unfortunately, Sean Hayter rejects her, instead wanting it to come out of the prettier person, or the person who, actually has the acting role. With this, Sally gives up her dream, even when offered a potential acting coaching job that could lead to more roles in the future. Sally is done. She is lost in her eyes, and any chance to be an actor has died. So when learning that Barry has escaped, she just goes home. She doesn't really care. Meanwhile, the prisoners are impressed by Fuchs' loyalty and not selling out Barry even after, getting the shit rocked out of him. When Fuchs walks into the prison all beaten up, they're silent, a sign of the respect. And with this, Fuchs is officially the Raven and has earned the respect of all prisoners around the world and starts a new phase in Fuchs' life. During this, Hank decides to show the men the sand silo, along with Cristobal. As they enter it, they all stand in the middle where they take a selfie. Hank then tells Cristobal that he has something to show him as he exits the silo. Cristobal, though, gets called back by the boys to look at this photo, which he agrees.
Hank, something went wrong, Hank. What? Hank! Hank! Hank, help me! Hank! Hank! Hank, please help me! Hank! Hank!
This fucking scene, man, it's just straight horror. Well, Cristobal doesn't die here, he basically does, as all the dreams and future he had with Hank are dead. Hank knows what he had to do, or at least what he thought he had to do. He killed all the men in order to secure his safety with his family. But what he doesn't know is that he killed the man he loved with that decision. It's a moment that mirrors what Barry would do. Hank, while being charismatic, at the end of the day, is a criminal, one who is willing to kill tens of thousands if he can save his own ass. Cristobal loved those men, and because of that, deeply cared for their safety. Hank, though, doesn't. He never even really wanted to start the sand business, and only did it so he could, I guess, connect back with Barry. I don't really know why. And later, when Cristobal and Hank are done eating dinner with the family, Cristobal decides to leave him, telling Hank that he has changed, and that the man he used to love would never do that. Hank is initially cold, telling them that it had to be done, and that Cristobal will eventually forget. But as Cristobal gets more and more distant, Hank gets more and more desperate. But eventually, Cristobal tells him it's over, and Hank accepts his fate as Cristobal knows the family secrets. If he leaves, Hank knows what happens, and Cristobal dies. This scene, man, it's what I like to call peak fucking fiction. Both Michael Irby and Anthony Carrigan kill it here, and it hits you so fucking hard, man. Like, ugh. Back at the lake house, a silhouette arrives at Gene, who shoots without hesitating, and then leaves the scene immediately. It's revealed that the man he shot was his own son, Leo, who brought him the cafe he wanted, and he slowly starts to bleed out. This scene is kind of funny due to Gene's reaction, but it's also pretty fucked up as he shot his own son. But anyways, as Sally walks into her apartment, she notices Barry and tells him to show himself. Time then flashes forward 8 years, where two kids named John and Travis fight out of the middle of nowhere. John goes home, where Barry and Sally are looking absolutely miserable. So yes, Barry contains a time skip, a decision that was considered a bit controversial and still is. If you go onto IMDb, the episode Tricky Legacies is the lowest rated of the season, and I like the episode, but I understand why. So let's just get into the episode, Tricky Legacies. Barry is a stay-at-home dad under the name Clark, while Sally goes to work as Emily, playing as a Southern girl. Life in the future for them is absolutely fucking horrible, and this episode is dedicated to them suffering. This is why the episode is so lowly rated. It pretty much only contains Barry and Sally, and a lot of it is just really dark shit. I like it. Maybe it's a little too much. I do find myself watching this episode and getting bored at certain moments. It's never so bad to the point, and I understand the point of the episode. But yeah, could have been better. John goes to apologize to Travis with Barry as they question how the hell he doesn't know what Call of Duty is. When Barry goes back, he teaches John that he must control his anger like he did in war. Barry is basically living a fantasy with John, and that he hopes that John will be what his disillusioned self wanted to be, but could never. A normal, non-rage-filled member of society. He tells him numerous times that he was a soldier and saved many people, including Albert, and that society views him as a hero. But what Barry fails to do is be a good father. When John goes to Travis to play baseball, you know, a pretty good activity for a boy. Barry then shows him a video about people getting killed while playing baseball to scare him. He's a good father, I promise. Barry never wants John to socialize, as he might gain a concept that his parents are lying to him, and that his life is basically an acted out fantasy. Sally also barely interacts with John and seems to be completely detached from reality. And when Sally goes to work, a man named Bevel admits to her that he, I don't really want to talk about it. And Sally responds by starting to have sex with him, but eventually choking him. Yay! Sally clearly broken down with having zero emotion in her life other than sadness. We learned that she constantly tunes into what Natalie is doing, as Just Desserts was a massive success, and it's airing its finale. When someone knocks on their door, Sally and John are forced to hide in a bathtub, while Barry just stands there outside for the whole night with his gun. They were ding-dong ditchers. At Warner Bros., they see that Gene Cousineau has arrived after disappearing for 8 years after shooting his son. Sally, while browsing the internet, then alarms Barry, saying that they're making a biopic on him and that Gene has resurfaced, to which Barry says he's gotta kill Gene. Anyways, the next episode is The Wizard, where Barry teaches Sally how to use a gun in order to protect her and John as he's leaving to go kill Jean. Sally then asked why they have to kill him, which is a good fucking point, as the movie is gonna happen anyways. Barry simply says he's going to show off his point of view, which could hurt his son's view on him.
So he doesn't want the truth about his countless murders out there. Get a load of this guy, right?
Fuchs is released from prison with his new gang. Fuchs looks completely different, covered up in tattoos, and looks dripped as hell. He looks and feels like the Raven, and has fully taken that identity. The next sequence is amazing, and frankly hilarious. We get some banging music, which is The Wizard by Black Sabbath, over this amazing montage. It's fantastic. Fuchs raises up a new girl, and then goes to No Hope Ball. Noah Hank's new company providing sand importation, which is also honoring Cristobal's legacy with a statue of him. Fuchs, in exchange for not snitching any of Hank's criminal activities while in prison, asks for a new house and information on where the hell Barry is. Hank tells Fuchs that he has no idea where he could be and is most likely dead, but Fuchs is able to convince him to try to find Barry while Hank provides the gang with their new quarters. Meanwhile, Barry goes to purchase a gun at Walmart, I guess. He then goes over to Jean's house to game end them and listens to some Christian podcasts until one of them say that murder is moral. Yay! Also forgot to mention that Barry's a man of God now, so keep that in mind. It's probably because God's the only one who's going to forgive them, so and there's that. Tom, Jean, and the Warner Bros. Executive discuss the biopic, to which Jean actually wants to shut it down, as during his isolation in Israel has become more selfless and wants to preserve the honor of Janice. This is when District Attorney Buckner, you know this guy, comes to talk with him. He then reprimands him for the shooting of his son, who is thankfully still alive. Jean then goes to Leo and apologizes to him before telling him that he came back to shut down the biopic, which Leo does not believe. Barry then goes in to try to kill Jean, but is forced to stop as Jean's grandson walks in front of him, stopping Barry in his tracks. Back in the middle of nowhere, Sally struggles to make John eat anything, and instead gives him alcohol so he passes out. Sally then has a disturbing hallucination where a man breaks in, and a car crashes into the house, destroying it. In reality, she simply tore down the house in a mental breakdown in another horror-influenced scene. At Fuchs' house, Hank is invited to dinner, where Fuchs announces his new girlfriend and daughter. Then Fuchs congrats Hank for his new success, as he claims that he killed Cristobal to steal his business idea. This triggers Hank, who has been burying the pain of that night, and also pulling a Barry by living on a fantasy where he honors his legacy and blames the death on his enemies. Fuchs doubles down, however, and Hank threatens him if he doesn't leave the house. Fuchs refuses to leave, which means Hank will have to force them. Meanwhile, Barry waits until the nighttime before entering Jean's house in order to kill him, but then all of a sudden, he gets bagged and wakes up in a room with Jim Moss.
John, I don't want this to be the last time I see you. John. I love you so much. Please say something to me. No.
Jim Moss tricks Barry into believing he's losing all the people he loved, but Barry then mentions the $250,000 he gave to Jean. This revelation makes Jim come to a new sense and looks at Lon O'Neill's notes, which also lines up the $250K. This, along with Jean, shooting Leo, makes Jim a little sus. Jean and Tom start a campaign to get the biopic shut down, but when Jean gets a call from Matt Iserson, things take a turn for the worse. Matt claims that Daniel Day-Lewis is interested in portraying him, and of course, Jean's ego takes control, as he decides to collaborate with him, destroying Janice's legacy. Jean is he's a tragic character, man. All the suffering just for him to end up in the same place where he started, but this time with his love dead and nobody respecting him. His kid hates him for shooting him. I mean, come on, man, just catch a break, bro. He's also called by Sally, who asks him for help as her and John have gone out to LA, most likely intending to leave Barry, who is a little psychopathic, During all this, Hank sends assassins to kill Fuchs, but they fail, forcing Hank to do it himself with a rocket. Of course, it goes haywire, where we get this awesome one-take scene where Hank tries to escape the mess he's done. Hank gets picked up by another employee, and they deduce that they need to find Barry, as he might be able to, mend the relationship with Fuchs if he can. So their first step is to kidnap Jean, as he might now know Barry's location. Jean meets with Matt Iserson, who tells him that Mark Wahlberg wants to play Barry, but doesn't really want to be a villain. Gene agrees with this, which completely destroys the integrity of the story, or whatever left was of it. But when Gene goes to meet Mark Wahlberg, it's revealed that this was all a trick into getting Gene to talk to Jim and the District Attorney, who questioned him about the $250,000. Matt also reveals that he was an actor in Gene's class, which means acting was his own downfall. Damn. They believe that Gene lied, as he is a talented actor and could probably do that easily, and that he shot Leo because of the $250,000 being drug money that he used to buy the house. They deduce that Gene was involved in the Chechen crime family, and that he convinced Barry to kill Janice, who was onto his crimes. This is reinforced as her body was found near a Chechen pin. Anyways, Sally and John arrive at Gene's house, and panics as he's not there. She contemplates turning herself in, but she has a vision that the policeman is the biker she killed, leading her to walk back to John. But soon they are kidnapped by Hank, who came there to find Gene, but instead find Barry's son and lover. Barry is able to escape Jim's torture room and receives a call from Hank, telling him to come back to get his son and wife. This leads to Barry entering one last rage mode for the final episode in the series. Wow. Also, quick side note, I do want to mention that the Barry escape sequence is kind of dog shit. It's really generic, boring. It's really lazy writing. He just literally grabs a knife that Jim left there and escapes. I don't know, it's just poor writing. It's not in character of Jin to do something like this, and I do want to mention it as a pretty big flaw near the end of the series. What's going to be so wow about WoW? Well, let's watch the series finale, WoW. Hank calls Fuchs, telling him that he can make peace by bringing Barry to him, but Fuchs declines. Hank then shows him Sally and John, which makes Fuchs change his mind, and he decides to pay him a visit. The police announce that the Janice Moss case has been reopened, with Gene as a potential suspect. Sally then tells John the whole truth, letting out her emotions in a powerful scene with some amazing acting by Sarah Goldberg.
Mom, please tell me what's going on.
We don't move around a lot because of my special job. It's because we're fugitives. Your dad. Well, he escaped prison.
Why was he in prison?
Because he killed a lot of people. Because he was a murderer. And I'm a murderer too.
She finally lets out the most important thing of them all, the fact that she's been a bad mother. John then embraces her, with Sally finally accepting John as her son, and John accepting her as his mother. But then John is, taken away from her by Hank. Fuchs arrives with his whole gang, and asks Hank to see John. Fuchs then delivers the most satisfying shit of all time.
You're very lucky Barry fell into your lap like this.
Seizing on luck is part of my profession.
You're a businessman, not some low-life killer. You got all this through hard work, seizing on luck, and as a tribute to the love of your life, who was murdered by your enemies. Denial. Stuff. I used to think I was a soldier, ignoring the fact that I never fought in a battle in my whole life. I was a poser, and I fancied myself a mentor, fostering other men's natural abilities, but it wasn't until I was in prison and I got beaten to within an inch of my life day after day that I finally dropped the bullshit and just accepted who I am. Man with no heart.
Denial is something that so many characters in Barry live by. Barry denies his morality. Hank denies the killing of his lover. Sally denies her role as a mother. Gene denies Janice's honor. WoW is about dealing and accepting denial, with Fuchs leading the helm as he's the only one truly accepting it and improving himself. He accepts the fact that he was a bullshit mentor and didn't actually improve Barry's life, but destroyed it. He also accepts that he is a man with no heart. So he offers Hank a choice, to accept the fact that he killed Cristobal or die. Hank breaks down, but when John walks in, he instead insults Fuchs, prompting Fuchs to shoot him while diving to protect John.
It wasn't supposed to happen.
It never is.
I just wanted to be safe. You know what? You are a fucking liar. The deal is off. Go fuck yourself.
I can't believe you committed suicide. I cannot believe you committed suicide. How could you have done this? How could you have committed suicide?
Everyone is killed in a humongous, gory, violent shootout, while Sally lays dazed, unable to find John, as Fuchs walks John, protecting his innocence by covering his eyes as he lets him escape. Barry arrives after the carnage has ended, pretty funny, and is happy to see John alive. Fuchs then stares at Barry, with Barry looking back with a sign of approval, much like Walter and Jesse, as Fuchs walks into the darkness to never be seen again. Fuchs' character in Season 4, man, is amazing. Seeing him finally morph into the Raven, accepting the horrible man he is incredible character development and so satisfying. And this final stare at Barry says so much. It's basically him telling Barry that through all they went to, he still loves him and hopes he can forgive him for ultimately destroying his life. And while Fuchs can't save Barry's life, he can save John. But while Fuchs is saving John, Hank slowly bleeds out, but not before grabbing Cristobal's hand, or his statue's hand. Hank then dies in the hand of Cristobal, hoping they may see each other in the afterlife, in a beautifully shot and executed scene. Hank was an amazing character who gets so much depth as the series continues. Hank was meant to die in the first episode, but Anthony Carrigan's amazing performance impressed Hader enough to make him a main character, and I'm so grateful. I feel like Hank dies, finally accepting the fact that he did kill Cristobal, and hopes he may be forgiven in the afterlife, which is a solid ending for him.
I will always miss you, Hank. You lovable bastard.
At a motel, Sally tells Barry that he should turn himself in, but tells her that he believes God has a different role for him, and that he may be redeemed after all of them survive. This prompts Sally to leave Barry while taking John as well. And this is the exact same way that Sally left Sam, and is a poetic and amazing conclusion to their relationship, and shows that Sam and Barry are both abusive and terrible for her. There's really no difference, no matter how much Barry thinks there is. Barry wakes up and goes to Jean's house, looking for a clue on where Sally and John to be. All the while, Jean contemplates suicide, after losing, well, everything. Tom tells Barry to turn himself in, and after some thinking, Barry finally concludes that he's a bad person, and should turn himself in to save Jean's life.
Just calm down. Where's my family? Please. Hey, I know they're here. Sally Reed, blonde girl. She's got a little boy with her.
I swear on my life, they've never come here.
They've been talking to Kusno. I know they're here.
Please believe me, they're not here. Jean's gonna go to jail. He's being accused of all the things that you did. You're the only one who can save him, Barry.
And you haven't seen a little boy here?
I haven't.
I see. You should call the cops.
The cops?
I'm gonna turn myself.
Oh, wow.
Just like Barry did to all the other people that he killed, Jean kills Barry with no hesitation. Like Henry Winkler said, Jean is too self-loving to kill himself, and instead blames all of his problems on Barry, effectively ruining any chance of him having a good legacy and destroying the Janice Moss case. If Fuchs had the good ending and Hank had the neutral one, then Jean got the bad ending. Him killing Barry is the most Jean thing ever, as it was the most selfish thing he could have done, as he did it just for the satisfaction of himself. Jean ruined everyone around him forever by killing Barry. As for Barry's ending, well, it doesn't end here, as we have a short epilogue, so let's look at that. Years later, we learn that Sally has become a high school acting teacher and has thankfully recovered mentally. John also goes to this school and tells Sally that he's going to a friend's house in order to watch a movie, to which Sally agrees. John says I love you to her, but Sally simply asks if the play was good. A man then asks Sally out on a date, which she declines. Sally then drives off in the dark, and with that, we conclude the Sally storyline. Sally to me gets a fitting ending. It's neutral, I would say. She ends up with a career in acting, but not the one that she wanted. She has a home with a kid, but not the one she wanted. Sally gets what she wanted, but not what she wished for, if that makes sense. While Sally is healthy, all the abuse from Barry and Sam has caused her to be loveless, and the abuse from her parents still continue to make her selfish to the point where she doesn't even say I love you to her own son, and asks instead if the play was good. Sally is a broken character who by the end ends up in a damaged but slightly repaired state, which fits her well. And then the final scene of the show, which is a controversial one as it has John watch the biopic made about Barry. This biopic is hilarious and completely over-the-top garbage Hollywood retelling of a story that paints Barry as a hero. I personally think this is a much better way at satirizing Hollywood than a lot of the Sally side story shit. I mean, look at the fucking Barry death scene. This shit is hilarious, man. At the end, it confirms that Jean is in prison and that Barry has been honored as a hero. And with that, Barry ends. Barry's ending sees him getting everything he wanted. His son views him as a hero and loves him. In fact, the whole world views him as a hero. But everything he loved or cared about, besides his son, views him as a psychopath killer, who by the end becomes completely disillusioned with his own world. Barry is a bad person, and I think the show answers that pretty definitively. Barry starts as a man trying to change, but ends as a man who thinks he's changed. Barry doesn't seek redemption. He seeks shortcuts, ones that may forgive him, whether that be through religion, having a son, anything really. Barry doesn't see redemption as a thing that can be earned, but as a thing that can just be given. And Barry, the show, ends with a dark comedy scene, which to me is perfect. Season 4 is my favorite season, but all of them are great. I just think that season 4 is a perfect ending, and so damn gorgeous. Look at these shots. Bill Hader directed this entire season. It's fucking amazing, guys. Just watch it.
And that is the end of my longest video. Please subscribe. I'm going to be raiding an orphanage tomorrow. Burning it down. Stay tuned.